Good evening, everybody. It's Monday, May Day, 2023. This is a regular meeting of Moscow's City Council. Maureen.
Welcome. It's nice to have warm weather and the sunshine. Let's stand up and do the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, good stuff. We got three proclamations to lead us off with this evening. First proclamation is for the Moscow Renaissance Fair, the 50th anniversary proclamation. Whereas the Moscow Renaissance Fair was established by a grassroots effort in 1974, and whereas the Moscow Renaissance Fair has been an annual spring festival since its inception, providing the community with live music, arts and crafts, children's activities, and homemade food from local nonprofits. And whereas the two-day festival in East City Park is free to all and held regardless of weather, and whereas the Moscow Renaissance Fair is a self-supported event that is produced through the efforts of dedicated volunteers, and whereas the Moscow Renaissance Fair has contributed to the city of Moscow by donating bike racks, a drinking fountain, and the construction of the Peter Besoa stage in East City Park, and whereas the Moscow Renaissance Fair has provided a model for the community through its exemplary recycling and composting program, which has greatly reduced the waste generated by the event. And whereas the 2023 Renaissance Fair marks the 50th anniversary of this treasured community event. Now, therefore, I, Art Betke, Mayor of the City of Moscow, do proclaim May 6 and May 7, 2023 is the 50th anniversary Moscow Renaissance Fair weekend in the city of Moscow. And I encourage all students and citizens to celebrate the anniversary of the Renaissance Fair and its contributions to Moscow and the greater Palouse region. So do we have anybody here to accept?
Oh, I miss Arlene.
Step on up, please.
Right on.
Miss Arlene, yes.
Oh,
There is that.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Feel around. The pot therapy.
Yeah. Good year.
yay.
True.
I just want to thank you.
And
everybody come to the fair.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Arlene.
Very good. And glad to see you're in the appropriate outfit for this too. It says Renaissance Fair. Next proclamation is the Bike Month proclamation. Whereas National Bike Month began in May 1956, and whereas bicycling has been an affordable, environmentally sound mode of transportation, an excellent form of exercise and fun recreation since the first pedal-propelled bicycle appeared in the 1860s, and whereas bicycling contributes to retail sales, tourism dollars, infrastructure, and policies that support community livability, and whereas bicycle commuting benefits both employees and employers through better health and fitness, lower costs, and reduced parking space. And whereas bicycling reduces heart disease, obesity, diabetes, and hypertension, and improves mental health and cardiovascular fitness. And whereas Bike to Work Week 2023 will take place May 15th through the 21st. And whereas Bike to Work Day 2023 will take place Friday, May 19th. To celebrate Bike to Work Day, the Moscow Pathways Commission will be on the corner of 6th and Main Street on Friday, May 19th from 7 to 9 a.m. And the public is welcome to stop by and enjoy coffee donated by One World Cafe and light refreshments donated by the Moscow Food Co-op. And whereas to celebrate Bike Month, the Moscow Pathways Commission will host their annual bike tour on Sunday, May 21st, 2023 from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. The annual bike tour will begin at Alteris Park and follow the Paradise Pathway to Highway 95 and then back to Berman Creekside Park for light refreshments. Now, therefore, I, Art Betke, Mayor of the City of Moscow, do hereby proclaim May 2023 to be Bike Month in the City of Moscow, and I urge everyone who can to cycle to work, to school, for shopping and errands, or simply for pleasure. Who do we have for this one? We got Tanya back there?
She is.
Oh, brilliant. Tanya. There's that. Congratulations. Well done. Here, step right up and yep, so the whole world can see. There you go. Nice. You like to say something?
I would like to see
Oh,
you.
good. No. There you go.
I'm Tanya Dennison. I'm the chair of the City of Moscow Pathways Commission. I'm pleased that Moscow continues to make spaces for cyclists that promote safe and accessible routes. Thank you. Bike Month indicates an ongoing commitment to the health of Moscow citizens and our community. I invite everyone to enjoy bicycling this month and to please join the Pathways Commission at our May events. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Well done. Thank you. Okay. Next up, and finally, by way of proclamations, we have the Public Service Recognition Week. And this is to honor the millions of public employees at the federal, state, county, and city levels. Whereas Americans are served every single day by public servants at the city, county, state, and federal levels to do the work that keeps our nation working. And whereas Moscow's public servants include a wide range of professionals who work each and every day to deliver quality municipal services and enhance Moscow's sense of community. And whereas day in and day out, Moscow's public servants provide the diverse services required by our community with efficiency and integrity. And whereas public service at every level of public service provide continuity and support to our representative democracy, providing for stability and the orderly transition of elected officials and representatives. Now, therefore, I, Art Butke, Mayor of the City of Moscow, do proclaim May 7th through May 13th, 2023 as Public Service Recognition Week in the City of Moscow, and I encourage all citizens to recognize the accomplishments and contributions of government employees at all levels, city, county, state, and federal. So, who do we have for this one?
They're all out
Public
doing their
services?
services.
Well, none, and so nobody wants to talk. I will return this to you directly.
Yeah, to our city employees.
Very good. Okay, next up is the consent agenda, and the consent agenda consists of items that were previously vetted by the Public Works and Finance Committee or the Public Works and Finance or administrative committees, and consist of items that are non-controversial or fairly routine in nature, and it can be pulled by a member of the council for further consideration. Gina.
Sir, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Okay. Haley.
Aye.
Julia.
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
Maureen.
Aye.
And Drew. Aye. Excellent. Consent agenda passes. Moving on. Next up, we have staff recognition. Bill or Steve Schulte, one or the other.
Fun.
Welcome, Steve.
Thanks for having me. So yeah, this year I get to be the lucky one to award the award for Public Works and Services Employee of the Year. So that's a member of the water, sewer, streets, stormwater, environmental services, and this year newly parks divisions. It's a peer awarded system where they get to write their nominations and identify one of their own that are worthy. So I'll read a few things here real quick, and then we'll have them come up. Brandon is always willing to go out of his way and help his coworkers. He started with the city back in summer of 2017 with a background in nuclear power plant valve maintenance. We were excited to add him to the street crew and excited that he glowed in the dark. He quickly became a pillar of the department. The quantity and quality of his work have continued to grow with the years, and he now finds himself more often than not in a leadership role in projects. His coworkers respect him and thrive in the workplace atmosphere that he creates. You can always count on him to go above and beyond and never takes any shortcuts. Brandon is consistently the dirtiest guy on the crew at the end of the day. So with that, I'll have Brandon come up.
So fantastic.
Go for it, Brandon.
One quick little thing I'd like to say, Brandon Ross here. I just want to show my appreciation to the city of Moscow. All the opportunities that have been provided me and my family since we started, be soon to be 6 years. Hopefully, a lot more.
We're lucky to have you.
Yep, we're happy to have. Nice. Any further staff recognitions this evening? Okay. Next up is public comment and the mayor's response period. And for the next 15 minutes in 3-minute increments, we ask the public to come up. If you got something on your mind, come up, announce yourself, name, address, tell us what's on your mind in 3 minutes, as long as it's not pending on tonight's agenda, nor before the Planning and Zoning Commission or before the Board of Adjustment. So if it doesn't fit one of those, please come up and let us know what's on your mind. Takers? No takers. Okay. Moving on. Next up is the Citizen Commission Report, Moscow Pathways Commission with David Schott and Tanya Dennison, who were just recently up here. Welcome back.
Mayor Betke, members of council, I'd like to welcome back Tanya Dennison, Chair of the Moscow Pathways Commission. Tanya grew up in Latah County and is a longtime resident of Moscow. She is the Chief Information Officer at NRS, an avid cyclist and walker, and has been a member of the Moscow Pathways Commission since 2017. She's here tonight that'll give you our annual report. So thank you for having us.
Welcome back, Tanya.
Me again. Thank you, Mayor Betke, city councilors, and members of the public. Again, I'm Tanya Dennison, Chair of the Pathways Commission. And we'll be talking tonight about the things we've done in the past year. The mission of the Moscow Pathways Commission is to promote and advise on the development of a path system in and around Moscow, embracing 3 important community concerns: active transportation, recreation, and resource conservation and enhancement. Introduction to our members, myself, I'm actively cycling there. Margaret Dibble, who is the vice chair, Janine Eslick, who's the secretary, Judy Brown, Robert Heckendorn, Aaron Bacon, and Becky Chastain. I'd like to thank everyone on the commission for their ideas and hard work in promoting our paths. Thanks also to Haley Lewis for coordinating between the commission and the city council, and David Schott for his diligence in connecting city efforts with the commission, Melissa Fisher for keeping us well documented and on track, and city staff for material support of our activities and upkeep along the paths. So following are the Pathways Commission accomplishments from the past year. We had our annual bike tour. We moved the bike tour into May from the fall to coincide with Bike Month and to allow for a new walking tour at the end of summer. Last year, our tour went from Gormley Park along Paradise Path to the Washington border, then back again. And it rained that day, but we were lucky and we caught some sunshine just for the time of our ride. We had the Bike to Work Day. We had members of the commission at a booth on 6th and Main talking with the public about our pathway systems, bicycle commuting, and cheering on the cyclists who went by. And we had our first annual pedestrian tour as well. We added this tour in order to have an event that is accessible to a wider range of people and to allow the group to experience the path at a different pace with more detailed observation and discussion. This was deemed a success by the participants, and we're excited to host this again this year. We again had the Bike Month proclamation last year, and we staffed a booth at 2 farmers markets. And this is an opportunity for our commission to inform the public and receive input on topics about the pathways. We always get a lot of interest and feedback from these events. The commission is also very interested in the creation and improvement of our pathways. Last year, we saw these accomplishments. Completion of the Paradise Pathway Lighting Project. This added lighting along the pathway from Highway 95 to Steiner, improving visibility and safety at dusk and nighttime hours. We provided input for the Wild Rose Court subdivision. Also provided input on a collaboration with the MAMBA, which is the Moscow Area Mountain Bike Association, on development of a mountain biking trail on the Moscow mountain property. This will connect some other trails that are already on the mountain with through this space that the city of Moscow owned. And we provided recommendation for development of a path within Lola Clyde Park, which is near PCEI. This year, we have a number of activities planned and goals that we continue to pursue. Bike to Work Day, as you heard earlier, is on May 19th. We're inviting you all to stop by. Again, we're going to be at 6th and Main. We'll have coffee and kudos for those of you on your bikes. We will be at the Farmers Market on May 20th and September 2nd. Again, we'll use these opportunities to educate the public about our pathway system and listen to their ideas and concerns. Our annual tour is going to be the day after on Sunday, May 21st. We'll leave from Alturas Park on the east end of town at 1:30, cycle at a leisurely pace, down the path toward Berman Creekside Park to the highway, then back again. We hope to see you all there. And we will have a walking tour of our paths late summer or early fall. The location is still to be decided. We will also continue, we have an ongoing project of identifying orphan paths and pedestrian rights-of-way. These are sections of city property or rights-of-way which may not be widely known, but we wish residents to know that they can use these areas to connect your walking or biking routes. A project is under development to create another underpass for Paradise Path at Highway 95. This will increase the safety of pathgoers by avoiding the traffic at the intersection of Sweet Avenue and Highway 95, as well as the entrance to the Identity Apartments. We will continue to pursue involvement in planning for pathways in new developments so that residents can access and connect to pathways from their homes. That's everything on tap. Do you have any questions or comments for us?
One.
Sure.
Not even a question. I just have to say, I was really lucky that I served 2 years in a row as a liaison on the pathways, and I loved it. And I'm addicted to finding orphan pathways now. It's like anytime I walk more than I ride because I have a dog who doesn't understand bicycles right, but she barely understands a leash. But I can do the leash, and we walk all over, and I'm always on the hunt because I never knew about them before that. So thanks so much for all the things, but for me especially, I love that aspect of hidden pathways.
And I'd like to add also that the undercross at 95 is tentatively scheduled for construction at 25. So it's
That's
moving
very
along.
exciting. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Well done. Okay, and it's been a lovely day, but not too long ago, it wasn't so lovely.
That is lovely.
Yes.
Look at that.
So right now, we're going to have the 2022-2023 snow report from Steve Schulte. Tell us about how much snow happened in December.
It did happen. That was, most of it happened, but yeah, I'll give you guys kind of a brief overview of kind of how our snow program works, coupled with how it went, and yeah. So with that, I'm Steve Schulte, the street and stormwater manager for the city of Moscow. Back here behind me, I've got Ryan DeBon. He's the street supervisor. So I'll be honest, he does all the hard stuff. I just have to stand here and talk about it, right? So yeah, last April when we did this presentation, it was the 18th. I think we walked through 3 or 4 inches of snow to get to this meeting. It was definitely below freezing. It was a little different weather. I mean, I don't think the air conditioning's on today, but we're pretty close, right? A little different than last year. So yeah, to kind of cover our program, each fall we have a snowplow training meeting where we get all of the public works and services groups together to go over the snow removal program, go through, train new operators, new plow drivers, discuss safe operation. We talk about where to put snow, where not to put snow, schedules, policies, procedures, what material usage, how to use each piece of equipment. It's a pretty thorough kind of overview of kind of how the system works. After that, we will break down into individuals and train them more one-on-one, but it's just a good opportunity to get the whole group together to understand how the system works. Because it's not just streets that does this, it's public works and services as a whole. On a big event where you're running 24 hours a day, there's 30, 35 people involved, and we only have 7 full-time employees on streets. So it's a group effort for sure. One of the things we do in the fall is calibrate equipment. Whoops, that's the wrong picture, isn't it?
It's always good to see, though.
Yeah, we did like how this one turned out. So that was calibrated for the purpose at hand. But no, we go through each piece of our salt and sand equipment to make sure that it's putting out the right amount of salt and sand. We don't need to put out too much. We don't need to put out too little. We want to be efficient. We want to be, always handling the conditions and making it as safe as possible, given however much snow it may be. This minimizes wastage, and there's kind of 2 main reasons that we do snow removal. One being obviously the safe travel. Fine. I'll wait for this guy to go by. Anyway, one being, safe travel for vehicles, bicycles, pedestrians. And the other one is we want to make sure the kids go to school. Now, they hate us for this. And snow days, it's kind of we're the dream crushers. I know all the kids of Moscow hate Ryan and his crew for what they do, but that is a major goal of ours, is to make sure that school goes on, that the commerce of Moscow continue. It has such a huge effect on daily life when snow occurs. So we're always watching the forecast. There's a lot of ways to look at the weather these days. This year was a tough one. It seemed like, see that narrow band kind of going through Moscow? We were getting picked on there in November and December, and just a little north of us, a little south of us, not so much. That was a tough one.
Is Malfunction Junction, is that the highway and the highway?
Yes, that is what everybody, even
8 and 90.
Yeah, even ITD calls it Malfunction
No
Junction.
kidding.
Everybody, you know where you're at.
Where's it at?
So
95.
yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. With the forecasting, we're always paying attention to, the air temperatures, road temperatures, moisture content, and the forecast to make sure we can do anything we can do to be proactive. But sometimes with snow, you have to see what happens and then just react. So yes, the 22-23 snow season, it was a total of 62.5 inches. So our average being 50.9, that's a bit above average. You can kind of see on the graph where that majority of that came in, with it being early. We were on pace there early in the year to potentially even go for a record, but luckily January, February slowed her down a bit. And then we had another little burst of winter in March. And then, yeah, another little splash in April early on, but luckily not like last April. So, yeah, our snow removal program, just to quickly go through, it takes a large plow truck, one pass in, one pass out. That's to get the road open. Those are going to start on priority roads to get you to the major arterials, to get you to the highways. And then we'll work out into the residential streets, and that can take up to 24 hours depending on the snow. We had some pretty heavy events this year that took some time. They were tough. They were tough on the equipment and tough on the staff, but we got the roads opened, and then we do the next part, which is, the pushback. So that's where, this is the part that everybody really, I think, appreciates, but maybe doesn't fully understand how it occurs. That's when we get to use the snow gates on the road graders, and that's when we can do our best to minimize, I say minimize, not eliminate, minimize the amount of snow that's in front of driveways. The first pass, that snow is broadcast off the edge of the plow without any control. We do our best to minimize where it goes and to put it in the right spots, but it's just a big shovel. It's tough to control. But with the snow gate, we can at least limit it a little bit. So this is in fast forward, and actually that's Ryan's foot going at double speed here. But yeah, with that, with the 196 lane miles that we have to plow, it takes some time to get through that. So with the pushback part of it, that can take up to 72 hours to get through the entire town. That's if all the equipment's running, and equipment tends to do what equipment does, and we can have some issues. We had a tough season this year on equipment. Started off with one big plow truck down, one of our 4. Luckily, we have a redundant. It's not a fully functional redundant, but it's a big plow on just a dump truck. It doesn't have a spreader. So we did the best with what we had, and we tried to minimize, its effect on our level of service. It seems like we did okay given what we were up against. But yeah, those guys put 14,000 miles on the trucks this year. It was a lot of miles. It was actually more than last year, more than the year before that. As far as mileage goes, a little less hours on the pushback equipment, the graders and the loader. So there was a few less of those heavier events that required the bigger equipment to come out and play. But still, it was a busy year, especially busy early in the year. So yeah, at the same time that we're pushing back, we're out there plowing 191 cul-de-sacs and dead ends. These things take time. And drive into any cul-de-sac and think about where you would put snow that isn't a driveway, mailbox, or a fire hydrant. It gets pretty tough. So they can take some time. We do our best and appreciate when people are patient and park their cars elsewhere. But that's a tough one. All in all, when we're in a full berm removal operation with the little plows doing the cul-de-sacs, the big plows doing the areas, the graders, we've got 24 pieces of equipment running around town, and it does take us a minute, but we do our best. So everybody loves a burminator. I know I do. I didn't at first, but it's growing on me still. Because once upon a time, it meant that we just left that giant snow berm there for weeks, months at a time. And we, the citizens of Moscow, drove around it somehow, or through it, or over it, or we'd get stuck on it. Since then, we've acquired a couple of pieces of equipment to assist us with removing that the same day. Sometimes it takes us multiple days. But the burminator did its work this year. It struggled to get out of the gate, to be honest with you. It had a rough start, didn't want to go the first day. It worked the day before. It didn't want to work when the snow showed up. But luckily our mechanics were on it and got us going as quickly as they could. So yeah, we hauled off with the 2.5 berm removals we did this year. We average right around 2.5 a year. So we were right in that kind of average snow event year where we haul off that much snow. We had 250 dump truck loads, which equates out to about 100,000 cubic feet of snow. It's a lot of snow. It takes a second to put that somewhere else so we can get the cars parked on the side of the road so they can go eat dinner or shop at their shops. If we left it on the side, everybody would hate us even more. So yeah, it's a process, but we've done pretty well with the equipment we've got to make that work. With that said, I'll just put a bug in your ear. The burminator is starting to get old. So don't be surprised if we start looking at alternatives or maybe younger versions of the burminator. This is the burminator 2. There was one before it. So there will be a burminator 3, maybe sooner rather than later. We're looking at all the options right now to see what we can do. And then as far as where we've been here's the last 10 years of snowfall for Moscow. Sometimes we have easy years, sometimes we have tough ones. 2017 was a tough year. 2019 was the year when it got cold and never warmed up for 8 weeks straight. They never got above 28 degrees. I think we had ice floors all over town. That was a tough year. This year, most of the snow fell early, followed by in that November, you remember we had a 5-inch snow event and then it rained 2 inches on top of it. That was nasty. But yeah, we still got up to 62.5 inches. So this was the 3rd year of La Nina, which is kind of a rare occurrence as far as weather goes. They're looking at a pretty strong likelihood of an El Nino going into next year. Now that's just, it doesn't mean we know what the weather's going to do, but maybe a little warmer and wetter, which again, it's the weather. It's going to do what it wants to do. But we the street department, we're looking in different ways to improve. We never want to stop trying to get better at what we do. Ryan and I just went to a conference about snow, a bunch of snow nerds looking at, nerdy snow things. And it was awesome. There's some new technology out there that, I wish I had the funding to get, but there's some things that we can implement relatively cheaply moving forward. So we're going to look at some route optimization and maybe a couple of sensors to kind of give us a bit more of a heads up on roadway condition. It's tough to know sometimes when it's going to all of a sudden snap and be black ice. There's some relatively cheap tools out there that can assist us with that. So we're looking at all the technologies that have come out to kind of give us a heads up. And we don't have a crystal ball on what the weather's going to do, but if we can try and buy one, well, we're gonna look around. But yeah, I guess in a nutshell, that's it. Any questions for us?
I was gonna ask what you need, so it sounds like I'll remember to ask about a burminator come budget time. And I like that there's maybe some cheap technology improvements we can make. Can you remind me how we split snow removal maintenance with U of I? I can't remember. We contract and they also have equipment, or is that where we still provide everything on the main drag for them?
So they have U of I owned streets, and then there's a handful of streets that are owned by the city that we then reimburse them for the maintenance of. So it's about 3.4 miles of roadway that seems like it's on campus.
Like perimeter and then like 6th and
perimeter
like
would be them. 6th is actually owned by us, but maintained by them.
Okay, very cool.
I'll get you a map if you'd want to.
No, I couldn't remember. Because the other thing I was going to say is thank you for always being really responsive to the emails. We will sometimes get very detailed emails of people who make it easy for us to understand what part of town they're in and why they may be unhappy with their cul-de-sac not getting done on time or like as quickly as they would like. And we always reach out to you for help coordinating the response with them. And thank you for always being very responsive and patient, as we all are understanding that the ITD throwaways do have precedent. And I was also going to say thank you for working on Christmas. I forget as much as I love there being a white Christmas, I forget that means that you have people who are likely not waking up with their kids at home and other holidays of note. So thanks to you and the crew.
Thank you.
That's all I got.
Maureen.
When did you decide to use salt versus sand?
Well, I guess we use sand and salt. The sand that we use, we call it sand. It's 3/8 inch clean rock chip. Some cities use actual sand, like the beach sand, because it's more readily available wherever they're they're at. For us, we don't have a lot of beaches, so there's not a lot of sand. So we use the 3/8 inch chip, which is more readily available, and it has less likelihood of migrating into the stormwater system. So your pollution level is way down with our system. But we use salt when you can, eliminate the slick road condition. We transition over to the rock, and it actually has a salt mix with it. It's 3 parts rock to 1 part salt to give you traction, immediate traction. And then it also has some melt as the weather warms up. Anytime it gets below 20 degrees, salt essentially becomes inactive. You're not going to get any more melt out of it. So we need that traction out of the rock, the sand, to give us safe road conditions.
So with this new machine that kind of you discovered at the conference, that can tell you where the black ice is, that would help you decide which one, whether you needed salt or sand?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's actually a handful of different sensors. There's some that look at the road surface that just tell you a road temperature. We have instruments that do that too, and we utilize those to make our determinations on what to apply. But there's remote systems that can give us a heads up in the middle of the night. Hey, it's wet and it's now 28 degrees. You're going to have ice. We can be more proactive in getting out there in front of the traffic as opposed to after.
I should probably know this, but where is it that you dump all the snow that you pick up by the burminator? I mean, I was impressed when we got that. There used to always be these big berms in the middle of the street for quite a while. I'm just curious where it goes.
We work with the university to use one of their vacant lots. It's kind of
great.
just off of downtown. It's a nice, close location. But yeah, we work with them to maintain that area, and they let us dump some snow on it in the winter.
Cool. Great. Thank you.
I also love the burminator. Some of my colleagues in Seattle, they got an inch of snow, so they couldn't drive to work this December. And so when you guys were using that, I took a video and sent it to them. They wanted to know where to get one. So I appreciate what you guys do.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Sandra.
When you have a big, long snow event and it's pretty much all hands on deck, what does your shift look like? How long are guys or women in the vehicles, and when do they switch out?
We try to limit to a 12-hour shift. So it'd be like a 4 a.m. to 4 p.m. and then a 4 p.m. to 4 a.m.
And is that in the vehicle the entire time, or is there?
We want to make sure that people stay fresh.
Yeah.
You get a break, you get lunch, you got to slow down every now and then.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you get into the really tough snow events where it just never stops, you're in that truck. That's your new house. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Appreciate what you guys do, and kind of unsung heroes in town, but good job. And we'll see what the weather brings us next year.
May it be snow.
So,
Thank you.
okay. Next up is the Downtown Streetscape Study Update. Cody Riddle et al.
Okay, just a sec here because it's some funny technology issue, but I think we have it figured out. We'll figure that out later. So thank you. I'm excited to be part of an update on the downtown streetscape study this evening. It was interesting listening to Steve's presentation, though. He brought up the sins of planning past with all those cul-de-sacs. That's the lesson for all of us here that are planning nerds. And but that was fascinating. I had no idea we had that many cul-de-sacs here. But anyway, it's important that you spend most of the time today hearing from the design team on this project. But before I turn it over to them, I think it's important to just kind of provide a refresher of just what this project is and maybe what it isn't and where we go from there. Just as a reminder, it was a conceptual design study. We took a look at the existing conditions in our downtown and gathered a ton of public input from you, input from the various boards and commissions, input at the farmers market. And with that, after a couple rounds of that and a couple iterations, did come up with a conceptual design that's evolved that you'll see tonight. The concept does include our entire downtown or everything within the couplet. We are tonight not asking you to approve a final design by any means. We do want to make sure that you don't see any glaring issues with the concept, because again, it has evolved since the last time you saw it. And if you're comfortable with where we're at, we'll finalize and organize a package that we'll bring back for adoption and kind of memorialize the effort to date. I think it's clear that this will certainly be a multi-year project, and we want to make sure that that vision is kind of documented and established as we work through things. We do also want your preliminary input, at least on how the project might be phased. Input we've received so far suggests that a focus on the footprint of the market and other events is probably a logical first location to focus our efforts. You'll see a drawing tonight that talks about things in terms of zones. Beyond that first zone, or zone A, the study is broken down into additional zones. Some of the larger zones you'll see are along Main Street, and then others are in smaller segments along those side streets, again, within the couplet. We did present this to the steering committee here just a while back, and they did like the idea of focusing on that Main Street footprint. Beyond that, there really wasn't much in the way of input on how we might approach things, and we do appreciate any input you'd have there. We could certainly reach back out to the committee, perhaps with some sort of an online survey, to try to get a little more guidance in that regard. I think a logical question that we've been faced with, and I'm sure you'll be faced with and probably have, is when do we start and how much is it going to cost? Our thought is really that we look at finalizing the conceptual study here in 2023, later into 2024, and then likely 2025 is when we could complete a final detailed design, again, but just for a first phase, or a first zone. That would anticipate construction likely in 2026. I think with other projects, as you're well aware, demand for very limited resources. I don't see, it's hard to envision construction really happening before that. And most importantly, that gives us as staff time to identify funding for a first zone, and then work on communication and outreach for the project. I think it's clear that it's clearly important that detailed design phase will certainly seek as much, if not more, public input than we've already sought to date. As it relates to cost, based on preliminary estimates, the entire concept you'll see tonight is roughly a $28 million project overall. That's everything downtown, kind of within that couplet. It's a big footprint. In the near term, the preliminary concept suggests a cost of about $8.3 million for a zone A, or if you think about it in terms of the footprint of the market and our other major downtown events. Any sort of funding is going to involve a sizable involve a sizable contribution from the Urban Renewal Agency. Certainly any grant we can pursue, and then a portion will be indeed city funding. Again, we've taken a preliminary look at this and do believe that we can identify a funding model that would work for a first phase of the project, but we can certainly get into that later. So again, before I hand things over, we're not seeking, again, final design approval this evening, or funding authorization for that probably surprising number I rattled off. We want to take any feedback we received this evening, finalize that conceptual design package as we talked about, and then bring that back to you in a nice bundle for adoption. And at that point, if we receive your blessing, we'd like to begin work on identifying a funding model for a first phase or a first zone to work with. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt and the design team, and they'll walk you through the design as it sits today.
Thanks, Cody. Well, good evening, everyone. Matt Gillis, Welch Comer Engineers, with my colleagues Del Hatch from Bernardo Wills Architects and Courtney Kramer also from Welch Comer. We're happy to be here. This has been an exciting and very fulfilling and satisfying project, especially when you're in a community that sees the value and has the eagerness to make the improvements. And so that it's just, we've done a lot of this work in other communities, and it's refreshing, really, to be here. So thank you. As I'm going to walk through a pretty quick agenda. I'll start things off, but primarily I'm going to turn it over to Courtney to talk in detail about the outreach process that we went through. We talked to a lot of people in many different venues and strategic ways. So she'll walk us through that whole thing, what we heard, how we reacted to it. And then Dell will probably spend the most time tonight, and he's going to walk us through the evolution of and the final concept. So please stop us at any point and ask questions. There's a lot of detail there. I'll wrap things up with a brief discussion on parking. Parking is very important. And then, as Cody mentioned, the zones or the costs. And then again, we're not asking for action, but direction. Are we on the right path? And so as a quick review, and you have seen this before, although it's been quite a while since we've been here, the shaded area shown in that teal color, that is the study or the plan area. It's essentially within the couplet. It's your core downtown. So that's the area that we've focused on. The process that we've gone through, and maybe it's corny to use a funnel, but it's really appropriate. In a planning project like this, we start very broad on purpose. We don't want to be presumptuous. We don't want anybody to think anything we do is a done deal. We start very broad. So we did some initial outreach with the steering committee and the public and staff and you all. We got our initial feedback, then we go away, plan for a while, then we come back to those groups, the stakeholders, the steering committee, and the staff. We get more direction, and it just continues to funnel us into a point to where we're pretty close to the final product tonight, provided any modifications to our direction. So that said, Courtney, come on up. She's going to walk us through how and when and who we talked to and the feedback that we got.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be with all of you here on this beautiful early Palouse spring evening. We had the pleasure of working with a fantastic steering committee of property and business owners in downtown Pullman, and really grateful to Sam Martinet at the Pullman Chamber, or excuse me, wrong community.
I am clutching my chest.
Golly. I mean, it only took me a year to do that. That's pretty good. With the Moscow Chamber, we're really grateful for Sam's hospitality for opening their space for us to hold our steering committee meetings in that area. And so had a great interaction with the steering committee, also working with your staff and council, had some really fantastic technical meetings with the staff, and really grateful for the staff's input. And then actually really had the pleasure of handing over a lot of the broad public outreach to the staff for deployment at the farmers market. And it seems so funny in this digital day and age to hand staff big boards and a bunch of colored dots, but it really was effective in helping us kind of see the community input in this project. So that was fun to see. Outreach strategy really was based on 4 primary objectives: street design, layout, pedestrian access, lanes, bicycle facilities, and stormwater. Amenities, Friendship Square, I'm sure you know, is, golly, I'll just call it a regional destination. As a performance venue, just lots of discussion about a water feature, a playground area, public art. We also talked about streetscape. I think Moscow is to be applauded for the way that you use your main street as a community living room, and how to make that living room even more inviting so that it's accessible to all really became a priority for the community and for our design team. And of course, parking. We're conscious that much as we want to see our region move towards multimodal transportation options, the reality is still many of our visitors to our downtown businesses will travel by vehicle. So this was that great DOTS project. I think it was, I know that you guys have seen these images in previous presentations. We came back to them again and again as just this really tactile and visual indication of the community's interest. The colors did not have any particular meaning. There was some discussion of, giving people under the age of 20 a yellow dot, and then between 20 and 40 a green dot. And then there were so many people that wanted to participate, it became too difficult to manage, which is a great challenge to work through in public engagement. Primary feedback really was that your community is more interested in innovative street designs. They're passionate about stormwater treatment and making sure that any street runoff that goes into the river is as clean as can be done. It's an improvement over what the existing infrastructure allows. The community was supportive of varying colors and textures in paving. And of course, there is great passion for street tree retention and street tree replacement and how that is managed over a long period of time. Amenities, again, Friendship Square as a destination came up again and again and again, and interest in a water feature in that space. I think it's no secret that the current water fountain has some challenges that are maybe problematic for maintenance and for safety. And so finding ways to relieve that burden on the city while also keeping moving water in a downtown setting really was important. Parking, we did hear feedback from your community that your community is willing to trade some parking for additional amenities or for opportunities for additional multimodal transportation, especially in the areas of ADA accessible parking spaces. And I know that Dell will point those out during his presentation. Overall, it's really been a successful project in terms of public input. We definitely would recommend, as this project moves forward, keeping the foot on the gas when it comes to public input. A delay between concept design and construction, people can forget, and that's okay. And so we want to make sure that the community isn't surprised when the first area starts to go under construction, and that businesses even now in 2023 have an opportunity to start thinking about 2023. Maybe some of them are holding off on a facade project because they want to time it at the same time. And so how do we help them using the resources in the community? How do we help them get in a financial position to be able to leverage those types of projects? That can apply to things like fire suppression lines and to grease traps and things like that. So with that, I will turn it back over to Dell to talk about Moscow's lovely streetscape design and the work that his team has done. Thank you.
Hey, good evening. It's nice to be with you folks again. This is a little bit of backstory here. That image that you see in the upper left was one of the first overall Main Street looks that the team started to evaluate. The circles, the size of the circles were intended to put an emphasis in those areas of town. So Friendship Square, kind of the heart of your downtown, that largest circle. And then as you move northward or southward, decreasing slightly. And you can see that there was quite a bit of emphasis on some of the side streets. We also were looking at, let me see if I can get the pointer here. We're also looking at first opportunities moving south to access Main Street there on A, and moving northward off of Washington, coming in on 7th Street, looking at what we might do even on the couplet end of the project to indicate gateways and entryways into the downtown. The two slides that you see on the right were some of the very early concepts of how we might handle the streetscape development. You're looking upper right, you're looking at the 5th Street intersection and how we might put some color into that intersection. It was evaluated as what we'll call a scatter intersection, where the sidewalk and the intersection itself are the same height, and then utilizing protective bollards and such from vehicles coming up onto the sidewalk. Lower right was one of the early concepts for the western end of Friendship Square, where we had quite a bit of curvilinear, more whimsical look to what the patterning and such might be. And we've since moved on and made it a little bit more symmetrical. So we'll get very detailed here, and we have some blow-ups for you to look at it. But this is A Street.
up to Main, all the way south down to the end at 8th Street. And then you can see that we're also doing treatment all the way through onto the side streets. So orientation is north is to your left. We'll go down Main Street to begin with, and then we'll come back and show some of the side streets. So there's a key to reading this plan. So all of those large yellow trees that you see, those are predominantly the honey locust variety that exist on Main Street today. Early and throughout the process, we heard from folks on steering committee, the public, et cetera, that the trees were very important and that we would try and maintain all of the existing trees to the greatest extent practical. For the purpose of this master plan, there's very few existing trees that we're saying that one should come out. We'll replace it with this. So as you look at the plan, you see those are the existing trees. So again, we're coming off of Jackson on A Street, come up to this point, first opportunity to get on Main Street. We think that that area right through there, and we'll talk about it in a little bit more detail later, is an opportunity as an orientation, maybe a location for some public art to direct people into the main street. The intersection treatment that you see here, this is, I won't say it's prototypical, but it is fairly typical in terms of incorporating some bulbs that are going to facilitate shorter crossing times on the intersection, provide more opportunities for introducing some new tree species, maybe smaller tree species, and some greenery at the sidewalk level. You can see that red patterning that is starting to emerge not only at the intersection, but as we move down into the 2nd Street intersection. Courtney showed you that slide where a lot of people said, yes, we would like to see some different color and texture in our downtown. And as we move forward, that color and texture is represented under the concept plan by colored clay pavers.
Can I ask you something quick on that before I forget it? How slippery are those when it gets wet?
They're probably similar to what you would consider in a concrete paver.
Thank you.
How much more does it cost? Like one of the things that I kept hearing was there's this huge cost differential between the colored pavers and the non-colored pavers. So that's going to have to be a selling point if we vote for getting the colored ones. That's a huge issue.
When you mention non-colored pavers,
Like cement.
just like a regular gray paver,
Like what we have
concrete
now.
paver. In my experience, there isn't a lot of difference in cost between those that are neutral or those that are colored. There's a slight difference in cost between a clay paver and a concrete paver. Oh, standard. Oh, yes, there is a substantial difference between colored pavers, whether they're concrete or clay, and just your flat work. And it's probably in the neighborhood of double or more.
Okay. So when you see those areas that have the kind of red in them, we're talking about those being not being cement.
Correct.
Okay.
Those would be the colored clay pavers. So you can see that we have them used extensively through the project as an accent.
Mm-hmm.
And when we zoom in a little closer, I'll show you some practicality as to why we're using them as well. So the 3rd Street or Highway 8, there is not quite the same intersection treatment there. We don't necessarily have as much flexibility with the state highway as we do with the city street. So one of the things that to note here, however, though, is that you see this crosswalk is a clay paver crosswalk. From this point on 3rd all the way down to 6th is sort of that market area, the farmer's market, and then half of 5th Street as well. This is what we're referring to and have concepted out as a Wooner Street. And I think we've talked to you folks in the past about what a Wooner Street is like. It is all at sidewalks and street at one level. So that entire area is essentially barrier-free in terms of people being able to cross and move through it. There are some controlled bollards proposed at this point and on the north end of 6th, and then halfway down 5th, which we'll show you here in a minute as well. We're going to take some close-up look at Friendship Square when we go into the crossing. So I mentioned the Wooner Street. These are some of the slides that we presented in the past, and the character of it is very much a pedestrian feel. Traffic is still allowed through it. There's still parking opportunities on it, but very much oriented to pedestrian and, in fact, activities like your farmer's market. Then as the project moves further southward to 6th, you can see that the crosswalks in pavers signify the end of the market area. Again, all of the yellow trees are existing. In certain situations, that tree in particular, I'm not sure it's come out yet, but it was one of the ones that was lifting the sidewalk very heavily last year. That one is proposed to be replaced. The smaller trees that you see typically at the intersections, the darker green ones, those are new trees that are proposed for the project. Smaller than what you have on Main Street today, columnar so that they don't affect traffic, but we'd be looking to suggest a tree that might have a nice bloom in the spring and some nice fall color to add to the streetscape. So we're going all the way down to 8th Street, replacing street and new sidewalk amenities and such up to that point. We're going to jump to some of the cross streets and some close-ups. Again, stop me if there's any questions through here. So I've reoriented you all of a sudden so north is to the top. There you can see the full extent of A Street. All of the trees on A Street that you see all the way from the intersection on the north side and the south side, those, and even up to the bulbs, those are all new trees in there. There are no trees in that location now. There are some trees proposed on the other side here. This crosswalk has been reconfigured and we think made in a safer condition. And that's where the paver fields are introduced to the project.
Question, sorry. That median where we're saying there's opportunity for some new trees and such, that for what it's worth, that makes me nervous because you get all the traffic that merges. I'm probably in the weeds now, guys. Sorry, we can hash this out later if that's better. But left A to merge onto the one-way is a total nightmare as is. And even because that lane that's in front of the automotive, the transmission place immediately turns into a turn lane to loop you back, that gets, so I'm open to the idea of us being mindful of it as the gateway entrance to Main Street. I will say that makes me nervous. And also with it being 95 and we've been moving these wind turbines through there, it's already been a tight fit with some really high traffic things with the bend in the road. So before I forget, my 2 cents is I think I'd rather see some mindful public art there to make sure that we don't lose visibility and we're not putting ourselves in a weird position with ITD. So art, not trees, my 2 cents.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. It's a good point in all of the situations as the design would evolve into actual working drawings, final design stages, all site triangles and vision triangles and such would be looked at and evaluated in each situation. First Street, east and west. Again, you can see here's another tip for reading this plan as we're looking at the side streets. If you see the light green trees here, and these big ones over in here, if they're illustrated in that fashion, you can see some more over here. Those are existing trees. If they are colored more dark, such as the ones at the intersection, those are trees that are proposed. And again, the yellow ones are existing as well. You'll notice that at the base of each of the existing trees, whether it's a side street tree or a Main Street tree that we have proposed that there is a larger space at the base of that tree so that we can get more air to the roots. All the trees would have new irrigation to them. The pavers that I was talking about as not only being decorative but utilitarian, as a paver strip would run along that side of the street. And you can see on this side, it only runs about halfway because there are no trees over here. Below that, say, 2-foot wide paver strip, we would put the irrigation lines and the electrical lines that would serve new pedestrian level streetlights. In general, we show pedestrian level streetlights in between the existing trees. For instance, those 2 trees right there are existing. In between those, we would propose a new streetlight. The streetlight character right now is concepted as something that would be more of a period type light that would match some of the lights that you currently have in Friendship Square. A note about accessible parking stalls. One of the standards that we've been looking at and incorporating into this plan is that we have at least 1 accessible parking stall per block. So we have one here. I think there's one there on the side streets. In general, there's over a dozen compliant ADA parking stalls in the downtown under the concept plan. Most of those, in fact, all of those, are positioned within the diagonal parking situations. One positioned right there. So there's a direct marked access aisle to a ped ramp. 2nd Street is one of the intersections that is being looked at as a scatter intersection, as well as 5th. You can see the dark areas around the perimeter on those 3 sides. That would be where the street ramps up to the sidewalk level. So the intersection is all at sidewalk level. We've introduced some of the pavers for a patterning design there. And then there would be protective bollards at each of these intersection corners there, and then all the way along the front there. One of the things that we're also looking to do on the Washington Street side in a number of locations where we don't have signalized intersection is to carry that bulb condition and design across to the eastern side. Question?
Is the amount of ADA parking that you're providing here similar to what we currently have?
No, it's greater than what you have
How much
today.
more?
I believe there's probably in the neighborhood of 4 to 6 stalls more than what you have.
Okay, my concern is for someone who struggles with disability issues in terms of mobility, that my concern is that I can go and park in a non-disability one if there's a parking place close to that. And when you have all those other parking places taken, I just want to make sure that there in fact are sufficient parking places that people like me decide, I'm not coming to them. I'm not coming down here anymore because I can't find a parking place.
Yeah, Matt's going to talk to parking and we'll go over some of those totals, but I think we've maintained quite a bit of parking in your downtown core.
Okay, I have a question, and it may be a Bill question. I don't remember. Does the city own the alleys?
They're public right away.
So I'm thinking through the people who downtown do take deliveries, and sometimes they're ending up having to park in the middle to unload the truck and things like that. What sort of design elements do go into consideration with things like an alley intersection because it's all pretty high traffic any day of the week, any time of day. But what, other than educating and maybe some signage, do we have any special considerations for alley movements, given that they dump you into pretty high traffic areas already?
Well, and I'll let Matt weigh in as well, but other than ensuring that we provide, as you can see here, the appropriate radii for entry and exit and such in and out of the alleys. Matt, anything to add to that?
When we would get into a design phase, we would have what we call a design vehicle what would be the most typical type of truck, say, that would go into there. And we would design the detailed radii and curbs and all that to a specific design vehicle. Yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question, but we were definitely mindful of vehicles getting in and out of there.
Yeah, and it's kind of the hidden, I know sometimes that if I need, there's certain alleys that I know that I can jet down to get across an intersection if I need to, for safely, of course. But I'm mindful that I'm not the only townie who does that. And maybe that's something that we can talk about as far as, I don't know, better label. It's public right of way, absolutely. But there's times where you're sitting at 3rd Street waiting for a delivery truck to pull out in front of you. And maybe it's just where we've already got the turn radius set that the parking encroaches on those alleys that it feels chaotic. And it sounds like it will be addressed eventually.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
In fact, a lot of those elements and turning radiuses have already been addressed. The drawing that you see here is obviously a hand-drawn colored drawing. It's done directly over the top of the engineering drawing that Matt and his group have already put together. So it's basically an illustrative plan of the preliminary engineering of the streets and the road. So the paver strips that I mentioned, you'll see them running anywhere we're running down to existing trees to get new irrigation to them and introducing new pedestrian level streetlights. You'll see that paver accent. You'll see it as it moves out of the 2nd Street intersection southward, excuse me, down to 3rd. You can see all of those trees, east and west on 3rd are existing trees. The assumption is that we are going to try and save those trees. I was walking along the north side there of 3rd this evening and noticed a couple that have very distinct heaving of the sidewalks and such. It may be in the long run that some of those trees get replaced because it may be almost impossible to establish new sidewalk grades with the trees in that condition with them. And to leave them may simply break your new sidewalks within a matter of a few short years.
I have a question about that. And I think I was the one that thumped on the tree thing last time. Obvious why. But how hard with this new design would it be to come to the end of a lifespan of a tree and have to replace that? I mean, we are looking at some pretty aged trees downtown.
Yes, you have a number of trees that either through wind or accidents or such that have been deformed, some that are really either damaging your sidewalks or your curbs, making your sidewalks inaccessible. Really, I couldn't give you a number, but as we would move through the final design, and in fact, in past projects, we've gone out and did a tree by tree inventory to establish this tree is a prime candidate to be replaced. These trees feel as though we can probably accommodate them. So it's kind of at this point, our assumption is we're going to try and save as many as possible,
Sure.
But in reality, it would probably take a tree by tree assessment. We'd probably work with David Schott and his crew and move throughout the downtown.
I like to hear that because I think we want to save as many as we can, but they're bordering on a grandma like me, most of them. So I think it's important to have somewhat of a plan. Tree by tree, I don't, okay, David goes for that. We're good with that. But I think it's important to.
Yeah. Well, it's a big study area, and I have not counted every tree that we are illustrating here, but there are a lot of trees in your downtown.
Well, the new trees, I don't know if you can even do such a thing, but all the older trees, the roots start coming up and they impact the sidewalk. Is there a way to construct the pavers around there so they don't bulge up as much as soon or something? I don't know exactly. I don't know. I know what that means. They're just like some of those are old and the roots have now really interfered with the sidewalks. The question is, do we have a kind of vision in terms of the new trees will take this long before we suddenly have the same kind of approaches?
Well, yes, we would have a vision if it's a new tree. We would highly recommend a totally different approach to how you plant those trees.
Okay, good. That
And the
sounds-
fact that you give each of those trees more of a root zone for them to move into versus lifting sidewalks, even to the point where a portion of the sidewalk might be bridged, might be bridged so that below that section, we're not compacting that ground super heavy. When you compact the ground, it makes the roots look for easier pathways. And a lot of times they're lifting sidewalks while they do that. So if it's a new tree, we're going to recommend that it's planted in a better way. If it's an existing tree and you have issues with lifting of sidewalks today, there really isn't a lot you can do to ensure that that tree won't lift your new sidewalks
I
or
was
new
thinking more
pavers.
about the new trees, because I mean, we live with what we have, and then it's the new ones and making sure that they have a long enough duration that they aren't popping up the, I mean, you just answered my question in terms of having the space there to
Yeah.
let them grow, and the roots are not as much of a problem for the new ones.
Couple questions. While we're on trees, might as well ask a question. Also, I know we're trying to maintain some. I know we haven't fully evaluated kind of the health overall, but to me, it seems like if we're going through this effort of replacing a lot of things, diversifying the species of tree, especially like, I mean, I don't want to think in these terms, but 35 years from now, insect comes in, wipes out our downtown tree, right? Finding something that's a little bit more resilient, alternating every other tree, I always think is a good design strategy. I mean, is that the consideration that's been thought about? What's the emphasis behind, besides maybe budget, which I appreciate, but keeping all existing trees and maybe every other tree getting replaced, or something to that methodology?
Well, we had a number of conversations on trees early on, and most people said save the trees at all costs. And I think there is something to be said for maybe introducing a little bit more diversity in the downtown in terms of the tree species that you have. Frankly, when those trees were planted was near 40 years ago. And they've done fairly well. Some of them have not necessarily kept their shape or habit perfectly, but the trees have done fairly well. And one of the first comments I made when we started this project was there's no way to replace a 40-year-old canopy. And the character that it brings to your downtown, the way you folks light them, I mean, it creates a really beautiful atmosphere to your downtown. But at some point, those trees do have a life expectancy. And when we plant them in conditions where they're surrounded by hardscape, it takes even it puts more stress on them throughout their life. And if irrigation systems haven't been kept up to speed, all of those things will contribute to the trees being a challenge to live another 40 years in these conditions. So I think there is some validity to getting a little more variety in your downtown. The honey locust is a good choice because it's relatively pest-free, and it is not, it's a good urban tree, but there are other choices as well that I think could be mixed in. And as we would move through the project in final design, we get into it in great depth and detail. Those would be things that I think we would explore.
Okay. One follow-up question to that also. So if, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm hearing something that I'm not, but if replacing those trees, let's just say every other tree, it's also better for the landscaping that's going there, right? The harder surfaces throughout there to get a tree planted existing and better longevity out of the sidewalks and also pavers, correct?
Yes, I think that's a true statement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay. So 3rd Street, you'll see on the south side of 3rd Street where the paver crossings start, that is starting to initiate the market area. So there, I know it's hard to see now, but there would be, we're concepting automated bollards there. So that would stop the traffic while the market's on and the street is closed. Let's talk a little bit about Friendship Square. This is the western side, and that earlier slide that I showed you had more of the curvilinear movement to it, et cetera. And through a couple of studies and recommendations by our steering committee and staffing, what we've done is we've taken and simplified it and mimicked more of the geometric pattern that also exists on the eastern side. So in fact, those two large honey locusts you see there and there are proposed to be new trees. All of the other trees, I think they are lindens that move through here and move through here, are in fairly good shape. We're proposing to keep those. Again, at the base of those, you can see that we've increased the space around them, providing an opportunity to add some more greenery at the sidewalk level. The concrete paver pattern that you see that starts at the crossing of the diamonds and moves into larger paver patterns through here, and then a little bit more of the diamond pattern moving into the side. The two predominant things that you'll want to, or three actually, that you want to recognize here is that there is a van accessible handicap stall there. There's another handicap stall there. There's another handicap stall right there. So good access from the western side of the plaza. This area through here is proposed to be an updated children's play area or structure. It's on the shaded side of that plaza, which is good, I think, for the children's play area. I think we talked early on about updating the structure that's there today into something that might be a little bit different, maybe even themed a little bit. The sketch that I'm showing there suggests that it might have a granary or a silo or some sort of a feel like that to it. The coloring that you see below it would be a poured in place soft surface for fall protection. The splash pad that we had in the earlier concept was quite large. Possibly even if you're moving through on your lunch hour, you might be surprised by getting wet with it. So we've reduced it slightly and we've kind of put it up over on this side in a more contained area, almost to the point that you have to walk through that space if you want to get wet. And we think that might be a little bit better situation to maintain this as a public space as well. Third thing,
the stairs, though, right by the splash pad.
Yeah. The third thing to recognize is that we still have to get emergency vehicles through here. So they would move through, right through the center with a little bit of a wiggle right there, 20 feet wide all the way through. All the way along this edge, we have protective bollards, and we have some protective bollards down here as well, so that somebody doesn't just literally drive through on a whim.
And again, always there or just sometimes there?
Well, they're there and they would be either automatically retracting or removable.
Okay.
Can I point to- Right now, the parking on the west side here, oftentimes when there's a farmer's market, they extend regular parking for more handicap parking. So it covers that for the farmer's market.
Okay.
And we'll probably do the same thing again.
On the north side, they'll designate that all handicap parking?
They usually, well, yeah, it's usually on the south side, but yes, whichever way.
Okay.
It's not designated, but for special events. it's
They'll sign it that way?
Mhm.
Okay. We are retaining the bus shelter and the kiosk. It's kind of hard to see right in that location. On the east side, and where everything matches up, is over here on the street. It's the same as it is today. It's all one level, so there are no curves. From the 3rd Street intersection southward all the way through 5th is where we're looking at that Wooner condition. So the streets, there would be a curb, but the curb would be flush. So we're also adding a couple of planter strips there and there. So we're essentially directing people to that 20-foot, 24-foot wide crossing area through there. You can see underneath, the improvements we're showing are actually a little bit shorter than the concrete crossing that there is there today. We would maintain the clock. We would maintain some of the banners that are on this side of the plaza. And you can see that the patterning is mimicked from the opposite side. This is the existing couple small groves or bosques of trees. We're proposing those to remain. And we're also proposing, those are the only ones in the project right now that we're looking to have a tree grate, because we like the idea of being able to arrange tables and chairs and such below those trees.
Like the
Yeah. So that's what you see when you're looking at those brown rectangles. These two large trees right there are new trees replacing the existing ones. And the smaller green trees that you see throughout near the streets over through here and onto the intersections would be a smaller, more columnar tree, maybe a flowering tree. The linden trees on this eastern side are not in as good a shape, in my opinion, so these are being replaced here. This would be looked at as sort of this entry archway on the eastern end. We've talked about having events here, music. We've talked about having sound system mounted to that potential sculptural archway. And one of the elements, you'll see it in a sketch here very shortly. You can see these kind of half circular areas here and here are looked at to potentially be like a seat step. So if there were an event that were to occur, we talked a lot about a mobile stage that could be set up here. There'd be some permanent seating in those areas through there. And again, emergency access moving through. This one goes straight through and out to the alley. So what has happened here is that your Friendship Square stops about right there today. So where we have this sort of activity space or performance spaces close to where the small traffic circle is today. So it's expanded all the way to the alley. Here's a sketch of what that might look like if you're looking from the east to the west. These are some of those stepped seating areas through here. These are those two bosques of trees. There's our existing honey locust and the big yellow ones. These four here and here are the new ones, the paver patterns that we talked about. And again, this is the Woonarf Street children's play area up in this area, and then that small splash area. Moving down to Fifth. So right now, this is the extent of the Woonarf Street. The Fifth, you can see the gray here and the gray here. That's where it would ramp back down to the street level, and then you would have more of the traditional curb area. Through the Woonarf Street, I've talked about these narrow 2-foot paver bands on the side streets. Through the Woonarf area, the bands are wider, and they're the full width of what the tree well or the planting area of the tree would be.
I have a question. So how does parking work the other 90% of the time that we're not having events and stuff without a curb to cue someone to park and not encroach on the sidewalk? What's the...
Well, we have and it's very close. On your main street, your honey locusts are planted right in the neighborhood of 32 to 34 feet apart. So you have a natural barrier there. We'll have a light in between them. So every 16 feet, there's going to be a light or a tree. And then we would look for opportunities of strategic placement of benches or bike racks or things like that, that would actually form some sort of a barrier for cars going beyond the parking area. One thing I didn't mention about the lights, because it came up as a topic during our early conversations about needing electrical power on Main Street, is that all of the pedestrian level lights will have an electrical receptacle both at the base and at the top. Top for festival or seasonal ornamentation, and at the base to be accessed maybe by farmers markets, et cetera. And at the base of each of the trees, we'll have an electrical receptacle. So there should be plenty of opportunity along Main Street through that market area for power. So this sketch shows what a cross section, let me go back here. If I were to draw a line through the center of that intersection, it conceptually might ultimately look something like this. And the reason we wanted to show it to you folks is that you will recognize that somewhere in about this point where those existing trees sit today is the low point. The sidewalk itself sort of butterflies to a low point at those trees. So when we get into the final design and we're grading to match the threshold of that door, we want a 2% cross slope out to that point. And to save these particular trees, we think we may need to wrap a planter around them that could be at seat height so that we can maintain the level that they're planted at. So that's what that's intending to show. It's also intending to show that you have wider sidewalks in situations where you can have outdoor furniture. There will be protective bollards right through here. We have the new pedestrian level lights, and at the intersections, we're going to have taller lights as well. There's your 2 travel lanes, and then we go on to the other side where the bulb is, and we'll have protective bollards there. We'll have seating or furniture opportunities, potentially public art opportunities. So the yellow trees are existing. These would be new, smaller trees, adding to that diversity that we were talking about a minute ago. And then some of the side street trees are existing.
I have a question, if it's okay. I am not understanding the why by adding more pedestrian level lighting downtown. Is it because we're going to need to fill in to counter the 34-foot, 32-foot spacing and put something there? Because I'm imagining that's going to be a pretty hefty expense. And if it's meant to be a vehicle for us to be able to have power to the vendors and stuff, I get that. But were we getting feedback from the community that the downtown wasn't lit well enough? Or is it just also serving as a vehicle for all the other things that we're trying to accomplish with a revamp?
Well, I think it is a lot of the things we're trying to accomplish because we're trying to stretch this kind of theme of your streetscape throughout your Main Street area. They are adding that electrical component that people were wanting. We're replacing some of the taller lights that you have today with a more pedestrian level light. I should also note that all of the lights are dark sky lights, so they're shielded. We're not losing any escaping light.
If I might, every time we've replaced the existing taller either Cobra heads or the shoebox lighter fixtures, we end up having to add usually nearly double the amount of fixtures if we're going to a shorter 14 to 18 foot light fixture. So if you think along the frontage, like say the ICCU bank, you've got lights about every 30 to 35 feet to get adequate lighting levels. The problem we have right now is our, especially in downtown, the shoebox lights are up in the tree. The trees have now grown up into them. They're blocking the light of the tree. We need to bring that light level lower below the canopy so we get better light distribution. It does mean you have to have those fixtures more frequently. So typically we're looking at that, 30 to 40 foot spacing on those fixtures when we bring them down to that lower level.
That helps. And the branding opportunity for the side banners and stuff, I really still like the banner over Friendship Square, which is between power lights. What do we string it up between at Friendship Square? Buildings. It is anchor points. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Moving down to 6th Street. Again, the pavers in the crosswalk designate the end of the market area. There would also be protective automated bollards at that location. We have a few situations, as you can see on the south side of the Western, where we have very narrow right-of-way, very narrow sidewalk, not a lot of room, not enough room to add trees, even questionable whether there's room to add lights on that side because the sidewalk in that situation is only about 5.5 feet wide. And then down to 7th, and again, you can see on the again, and this is common where we would not have a signalized intersection, we would carry those enhancements across Washington. Again, existing trees pretty much through here. Again, some are fine, some may have some challenges. Okay.
Yeah,
Sir. Go ahead.
yeah. First sit down.
Let me go back.
Question, and it could be for both of you, but when crossing 95 on the east side of the street, right when we're making that connection, I know we're, if you will, ramping down design, but we're also encouraging connection coming to Main Street. Having the office that I work in is on Main Street, and I often park a couple blocks away. So each day I'm playing leapfrog to get across 95. I think in the future, has it been considered, I should say, about modern day a way I can hit a button, or any person hit a button, it's flashing like in other areas to kind of indicate other than just by sight, so I don't feel like I'm playing the Nintendo leapfrog game. I do have an insurance policy, but I do get worried about getting splat occasionally. So
Yeah, on 95, we got to deal with ITD.
right,
It's their
and
road.
I totally understand there. That's not there's opens up a whole different other conditions, but safety is a problem. I think is important.
Sure. Through this process, the ITD, Idaho Transportation Department, has been a pretty good partner. We've talked to them several times. They're familiar with this. I don't know if they would go for what you're referring to is an RRFB. You push a button, it flashes yellow, right? Pretty effective. That's certainly something we could coordinate with them, especially if there are documented accidents. They don't like hot spots.
I think yeah, like I love the city of Moscow, but not that much. But I think even if it's not documented, I'm more worried about like potential. I'd rather avoid documenting anything than having it, whether the numbers are there. But yeah.
And just a comment related to beacons, pedestrian activated beacons. In that 3-lane configuration, it is very challenging in that the center lane may not see if there are vehicles that are obstructing those 2 beacons. And so that center lane driver may not see that. And our experience, it was probably more of a student population, but we do have that same population downtown. If you recall, at Peterson Drive, we put in overhead flashers. And so we had student housing on the north side of the Highway 8, traversing to campus. We did not have any recorded accidents of the pedestrians being hit until we put in that flashing beacon, and somebody feels that they hit that button that somehow gives them protection. And the first vehicle at the curb line stops. The second one, even with an overhead flasher, doesn't. And that's where we had 3 kids hit in the first 3 months of that installation. So we're very cautious in the multi-lane situations like that, where that sometimes I want you to feel like you are playing Frogger, so you are exceptionally careful and don't think just hitting that button somehow is going to give you protection. If it's just 2 lanes, it's much more effective, or at least I have less of a concern of that center lane not being able to see those flashing beacons. So it is something that we'll certainly, I think we need to assess. I think the curb bulbs will be very beneficial to shorten that crossing distance and to get pedestrians out as far as that parking lane. And I think that will be a substantial safety improvement. And certainly we could talk with ITD, but I am concerned, just based on our past experiences, that there are some perceptions that flashing light is going to give you safety. I really want you to be looking for that center lane every time, because I'm concerned that's the person who's not going to see you. Right. And not realize that people are stopping, not because traffic is stopped in front of them, but because they're stopping for that pedestrian. And you really need to make that eye contact to that center lane driver.
I want to add to that this whole concept. I'm still going to our roundabout. I see the yield sign. I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to do. I'm learning new tricks, right? And then I get to that hand activated where the people can cross on Mountain View. Mm-hmm. And that's new enough. I still don't know what I'm doing. I stop. The people behind me are thinking I'm an idiot because I'm stopping at yellow instead of red. Whatever it is that we are eventually able to do, please make it make it simple, make it clear. Don't let it be that interpretation for any one of the lanes. Let's just, paddle grate comes down, everybody has to stop. I don't care what, but.
In track.
Yeah, very, very clear.
And to that point, I mean, maybe we have an opportunity with the entrance on the south, Malfunction Junction. The streets guys left already, but maybe there's some opportunities with signage to really make sure we're branding ourselves as like a walking, pedestrian friendly community. Well,
I mean, I love the people, but I just know people, right? Hey, there's another sign.
Yeah.
Julia.
Okay, I just want to say, well, a lot of things, but just want to say a lot of things. I really appreciate the design and the professionalism and the thoughtfulness of all of this. I am not a designer, so it's great that there are people that figure that stuff out. I have a couple of questions, just things that concern me. One is that when you put the vegetation around those bulb outs, doesn't that make the pedestrian harder to see?
I can address it from an engineering standpoint.
Sure.
We're very concerned about sight distance, which is what you're referring to. So anything that Dell wants to plant is going to be very, very short.
Okay.
But go ahead, Dell.
No, that's
Okay.
Thinking of it as being bigger.
Yeah, that's a great comment.
Another question I have is, this, I may have been mistold that we couldn't have colored sidewalks, that they all have to be just the reflective white in Idaho. Is that a lie?
That is not true.
Thank you.
If I can clarify, is it sidewalks or crosswalks?
Sorry, I meant crosswalks. Thank you.
Oh.
I misspoke.
So crosswalks they do need to have some differentiation is what we're after. So what you'll see is the white, but it is acceptable to have just a contrast. Say you have black asphalt or along with it's a maroon colored concrete crosswalk. What cities will often do in addition to that though, is they'll stripe the edges of that concrete crosswalk to further provide that contrast.
Thank you. And thank you for.
This is a super nitpicky possible observation question. How red are the pavers? Are they a bright red or are they a maroon?
You're getting to it.
Because we've staken for Pullman once tonight. And that hurts my soul a lot, I'm not gonna lie.
Actually,
Not Boise State,
I've
Joe.
indicated them as more of a red on the drawing, but we haven't actually selected a paver. That would be in the final design where we would bring in sample colors of what the clay paver options would be. And we would probably have our steering committee work with us and probably select a color. Last thing we would want to do is have gray and maroon pavers.
Thank you. Right.
Okay.
Hey, Dale, roughly do you have a size of the paver? Like ballpark, what you're thinking of right now?
Well, the pavers come in a number of sizes. These in particular, I would suggest that we use the standard paver size, which is nominally 4 inches by 8 inches. And there are different thicknesses of the pavers. So the ones that would be in the travel surface would be more of about a 60 millimeter thickness and have a extremely high PSI rating for traffic and things like that. The ones within the sidewalks are a little bit not quite as thick. They're more of a decorative one, but they're not meant to carry vehicular weights.
One more while I'm here, is that okay?
Okay, go for it.
And if you want to put this on hold and answer at the end, that's absolutely fine too. But again, I'm going to go with Julie and be like, I love this. I mean, the design, the magic you folks can put together, it boggles my mind because I can't see it at all. So that's awesome. But I will say what I do see, as much as I enjoy looking at all the pavers, because I am picturing them in a slightly different color variation. But I can do that. I can go that far in design. But I also, my hands are starting to get sweaty thinking how expensive those are. And I'm like hyperventilating just a little tiny bit because that's a lot of different pavers. And do we have options to maybe not have so many, even though they look amazing?
What?
Oh, go ahead,
Yeah,
Bill.
I think there's always the option to reduce the paver count. At each of the intersections, we've added a paver field or patterning. Those could easily be reduced or simply even eliminated. One of the reasons that we like the pavers along the curbs that align with the trees and the lights is that if we ever have an issue with that irrigation or we have to get to that power, it's much easier to lift the pavers out and access and correct a problem and reset the pavers versus saw cutting,
Sure.
tearing up concrete, pouring concrete back, colors never match, whereas the pavers, the reason we're suggesting a clay paver is that the clay pavers will retain that color because they're colored through the entire way, whereas the concrete unit pavers have a lot of aggregate in them. And once they get old and the surfacing starts to wear, the color diminishes because you're seeing a lot of the aggregate or the gray. So there's a benefit to having the pavers along those curb lines. Reducing the fields of pavers is something definitely that could be done.
Thank you. It looks really pretty, but I'm getting nervous.
Okay, on to parking.
On to parking, exciting stuff. We know that parking is very important. We heard that routinely when we met with the public, the stakeholders in the steering committee. And we wanted to find a pretty simple way to, I guess, audit ourselves from a parking standpoint. So what we've come up with, and you've probably already figured it out, the blue, for example, on Main Street between A and First, there's a net gain of 5 stalls. Okay, so blue, if you just take a quick glance at it, we're gaining stalls. Green, we've got no change. Okay, it's status quo. Yellow, we've got a net loss in stalls. And this was strategic. We knew what we were getting into here because this is the Woonurf area, Friendship Square. We traded some parking for some other stuff. And as Courtney mentioned earlier, that was okay from a public standpoint. We're willing to give up some. I don't have an exact percentage for you that the public wanted, but there was an appetite to give and take. We'll give some stalls for some other amenities. Yes, sir.
In your data, do you have a percentage of what the public? I mean, maybe not here tonight, but.
Not what the public didn't give us a percentage, but what we have in the overall study area, we've got about a 2% increase in stalls, okay, in the overall area. If we look at Main Street alone, we've got about a 2% reduction. So in my world, in our world, in downtown design, those aren't huge numbers, although there is a monetary value of every parking stall in your downtown. But this, from our perspective, you're getting a lot for the few stalls you're losing on Main Street.
Yes, but.
Yes, ma'am.
I can't help it. I mean, the number, I realize that looking at the numbers, there's a gain, but we're getting 6 way over here and 6 way over here. People aren't parking there because it's too far away to get to the farmer's market. And it's too far away to get to what's over down here. And so it really does feel like a gigantic loss in terms of who's walking, right? My mom and I are not going to park over there. She's not going to walk that far to get to One World, right? It's just, that's a really long way. So number-wise, good deal, but looking at where they're gone from, the end of town, I mean, whoosh, you have 5 places to park over there. Yeah, it's there, but I can't convince anyone with good, hey, we're gaining parking spaces.
Fair enough.
I disagree.
If I might,
Yes,
and I guess one of the areas on Forest Street that could be evaluated, widen that sidewalk on that north side or not,
Yes.
or retain any parking that would exit the alley. And so that's the greatest location of loss is certainly that section of Forest Street. You've got 11
right there, right?
11 parking spaces.
Yeah.
it is possible to reevaluate whether we want to expand the sidewalk in that fashion. I mean, I think the idea there was for the art gallery that would be located at the Pritchard Art Gallery reopening to allow some outdoor art installation. But it could be that maybe we look at other corner installations and push that curb line to the north and continue with angled parking on that side as well.
Very good point.
That helps my heart a little bit. Thanks. Thanks, Bill.
Stripe the main parking lot. Great.
I like that a lot.
Well,
Jackson.
we took an early look at this, hoping that by restriping it, we would, gain 20 stalls. I think we might have gained 3 or 4, but it was that said, this parking lot is not a safe facility. We've talked about this before. I think there are 6 access points here.
Yeah.
So 6 locations where there's a conflict or potential conflict. Reconfiguration to a more kind of a slightly more traditional where you've got a couple of access points is probably something worth considering down the road. Any other questions on parking?
And you said before a net increase in accessible parking spots for disabilities.
Yep, there is. Dell, you thought there were how many more accessible stalls?
4 to 6 ADA stalls than you have today. And again, they're all compliant stalls. Some of your stalls are what I would say are non-compliant. Proper access,
Better pop up to the microphone so we get you on the record.
excuse me. Additional ADA stalls overall in the downtown. Again, our goal was to have one every block. And a lot of the ADA stalls I've seen in the downtown are not necessarily compliant in terms of proper access to the sidewalk, marked aisleways to get there, ADA, truncated domes, all of those types of things. So all the ones that we're proposing now are set up to be fully compliant.
I think I'm laughing. I was making eye contact with you, laughing about any more questions about parking, because it is, you can tell, one of our favorites, right? I do think Sandra made a really good point in that it color code wise, it kind of leans more towards one side than the other where we gain. And I do think that stay up about maybe rethinking the distribution of positives and negatives might be a cool idea. And one that would answer some of the concerns about, I only shop at One World and the closest parking space is by CJ's. They're just, so I appreciate and welcome to the world of parking in Moscow. We all have dealt with this kind of, but I think it's important to spread it around if possible.
I'll make I have a comment about parking. I know this is everyone's favorite topic to talk about. This is coming from a person who likes biking 5 months out of the year to work. I park, I can always find a spot. And I know it's a sensitive subject, but I disagree with the statement that we're saying that most of the citizens in Moscow are okay with losing spaces of parking. I think it's actually quite the opposite. I think a lot of people, based on the meeting that we held here, I attended it when I wasn't on city council. I was under the impression that most people were not a fan of losing a lot of parking spaces in general. And, I design buildings for, and so I get that. It's a sensitive issue, no matter where you go or no matter where it's at, right? And I would rather have more building than parking. But I would like to see us think big picture, 30 years, what's going to happen? Hopefully in 30 years, we don't have a lot more cars, but we still live in Northern Idaho. So I think we don't live in a big metropolis where, but hopefully where things are going it is, but I still think we need to think of other locations, long term. So that's just my thoughts.
I am just going to throw in there really quick because this is my soapbox. Yep, you're young. We have one senior in here tonight, no offense, Victoria, and thank you for getting here, right? But we have a lot of seniors who participate in a lot of things downtown, and they have big mobility issues, right? And they can't bike, and they can't walk far. I know that, right now, I think it's far away at that upper +6 to get to One World. I don't, but I have friends that really do. And so I worry a lot about that. I mean, this doesn't look very senior friendly, and I know I get on that a lot, and I always will. But we say we didn't have many seniors here. Well, or we had input here when people came to the meeting, but I bet we only had Victoria, who's in our senior range. And I'm grateful that you're here, but that's something that I think we really have to focus on.
For the record, my comment was for parking, for people, not against it.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I heard that you get to be able to bike and you can walk a long ways. Sorry. I heard that, Drew, and I apologize if I took that wrong, but that is my concern with those up there.
And I'll throw a comment in the bucket on the other end of the spectrum. Thank you for looking at parking. Thank you for rearranging and froggering it. I think it looks great. I don't have any concerns. Do with that what
I wouldn't
you
make
will.
the assumption that seniors are disabled.
No, I just know that the ones that I'm with a lot have a hard time walking that far.
Okay,
Yes, sir. Moving on. Oh, this is tough to see. I apologize. So this is the last slide. The cost. Cody alluded to this already. The cost of everything within the study area is in the $28-29 million range. Those are 2023 dollars.
Yeah.
Right? So 15 years from now, it's going to be more. Staff had a really good idea to not necessarily prioritize what gets done when, but generally speaking, distribute these out into zones, right? Bite-sized pieces to where, because the fact of the matter is, you're probably not going to get $28 million to rebuild your downtown. You probably wouldn't want to do it all at once anyways. That being said, if we can eat the elephant one bite at a time, that was the strategy. And so we've got zones A through N, I believe.
Wow.
And so
Hard to see.
generally speaking, the A, B, C, those were generally on Main Street, and then it's kind of a smattering all throughout. And we can get you copies of this so you can digest it more closely.
So like zones,
That sounds about right, yes.
$2 million chunks.
No. Well, no, not quite. So here's an example. Zone A would be that Woonerf area, right? So Zone A would be Main Street from 3rd to 6th, okay? Dell had described it, the Woonerf being to 5th, but it actually, we think it would make more sense to go to 6th. So it's that section and the improvements at Friendship Square. That improvement, I believe, was $8.3 million.
That also includes 4th out to Washington, correct?
Yes, sir.
yep.
Yes, correct. So not quite $2 million a piece, but the side streets, as you can imagine, they're smaller areas, shorter lengths, less costly.
Yeah.
Main Street is the biggest ticket item for sure. So again, I apologize if this is tough to see. I can't even see it on this screen. But we'll definitely get you one that you can read and digest. I guess the point is, this is a long-term, multi-year, multi-phase project that's probably measured in, well, I don't even want to venture to say how many years, but it's many. So that being said, we would love to hear any other thoughts. Generally speaking, as Cody mentioned, we're looking for not action, but an acknowledgement that we're still heading in the right direction. So the next time we see you, we can say, here is the document you directed us to produce, and we did, and accept it at that point.
Maureen can go first.
Just a
Okay.
quick one.
No,
No,
however
go
you want
ahead.
to- she-
It's you, Drew.
We're going down the line.
Okay, going down the line. I will say, having presented to city council in the past, it's a lot more comfortably on this side of the table than where you folks have been tonight, and I've enjoyed that a little bit more. But not trying to make your job difficult by any means.
That's okay.
I just have, thank you for the presentation. Things line up. Thank you for answering all the questions. But one, as especially we started going into talking about funding that Cody mentioned, I am thinking about how we're talking about stormwater and how we're thinking about captivating that. I'm definitely an advocate for that, right? And I know that those are phases to come as we start talking about those particular details in plant life. The one thing that I see over and over again, a lot of the work I do is in Seattle, Portland, right? Those areas are often designed really well and they look really good on our websites. However, as we start going into the funding stages of that, we have to have a maintenance funding in order to keep that, because oftentimes when I go to a site visit, all I see are McDonald's bags and other things I don't want to see floating in there, right? And I know Moscow's better than that, right? And I know we have a smaller population, so it's easier to maintain. But I still do think a budget to maintain that is vital to how that functions from all levels. And so I know that doesn't really pertain to design, but it will influence it for sure.
Well, it certainly does, because we would not want to design something that you're not going to maintain. Right.
Yeah. And so just like, 10 years from now, what does that look like for a continual maintenance process? I think it's often forgot about when we're talking about that.
I'll just add one thing to that comment, and it's a good observation. A couple of the areas, and I remiss in not pointing them out directly, especially through this Woonarf area that we're talking about, at the edges of the Friendship Square and a couple of the intersections. We purposely enlarged some of those bulb areas to incorporate what might be a rain garden design to take advantage of an opportunity to pre-clean some of the stormwater before it goes into Paradise Creek. As a result of that, and it was one of the things that the public told us, yeah, why don't you guys think about that? That sounds like a good idea. As a result of that, that's in some of those cases, that's where some of the parking stalls are going away, because we're making some of those bulb areas a little bit bigger. So,
Julia? Morning.
It really wasn't addressed, but just at this concept level. But one of the things that I think is a concern is making sure that the restaurants and other places have like benches, kind of like you have them now, that people can sit outside the ice cream place and do that. Our places have, and so wherever you put it, I just think those are important improvements that we had, especially during the pandemic, and then we continue to have outdoor seating.
Again, I'm remembering bits and pieces of the last time you were here, because I think it was maybe the last century. It seems like a long time ago. I love that you're saving as many of the trees as you can, but I love that I'm hearing the need for a plan, a replacement plan, and an acknowledgement of, okay, yeah, these are great now, but this is a long-term plan. And I think that's crucial. I love the diversification of the forest. Big deal. I don't think you're ever going to make everybody happy with parking. Just going to say that. Just throw it out there. I've been trying a long time. I haven't made everybody happy yet. I think spreading it out a little bit, I'm sure you already thought of it. Think again. I think the positive gain, the gain is almost overshadowed by the fact that it leans over to one side too much. I'm glad that we're getting more ADA compliant spots. And I think that's a huge marketing tool right there, that we are designing in accessibility with purpose. I think, we got to be careful of the maroon, the crimson. It can't even remotely smell like WSU. Although we like when they come over and come to our market, and then they go home. We like that a lot.
I'm okay with WSU. It's just not Boise State. You gotta be there.
No orange. No orange. No orange. Other than that, I just commend you. This has been quite a journey from the snaking, beautiful. I loved that design, but I don't think anybody got it but me. It felt like it was people were like, what is that? This is awesome. And it's come a long way. And thank you for the diligence. Go ahead.
Well, you're so nervous.
No, I'm not at all. I'm just like, I am done. We've talked parking. I'm good.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the response on the parking. I'd like, hopefully, maybe with those 11 spaces up, might be able to work something there. Overall, fascinated by all of this. I mean, well done and a really great presentation. I'm still a little squishy about how much open space downtown. I'm also squishy about automated ballards that are going to freeze and not work. But not big concerns, right? If that's what folks are hankering for, okay, right? And I understand the reasoning for the automated ballards. It just seems like anything that gets automated breaks, and then I never know how to fix it. I just want to hit it with a hammer, but I don't get paid for that part, thank goodness. So yeah, I'm nervous about how much. I'm glad it's not a snake anymore, right? But there's a lot of open, unknown area. I hope it's not a thing that will be like 10 years from now. It's like a really dated thing. We go, what were we thinking? But we don't have a crystal ball, right? So I guess my end is just like roll with what we have. It seems like that's what the folks were asking for. And we'll see where we end up with the next phase, I guess. But thanks.
Thank you.
I wrote myself a note because I didn't want to forget, especially if we're talking power and stuff. And I don't know, this may be in my last year's notebook, about charging station infrastructure for cars and things like that. As far as looking to the future, they're really expensive and I think they'll eventually get cheaper. But as we're talking about changing transportation and we're planning for voltage and things like that, I don't want to lose sight of us planning for things more than just someone running a power cord or us putting our Christmas lights, holiday, seasonal decor up. And then I'm really stuck on this may be in direct contrast to whatever I said last time you guys presented about the sidewalk vibe. The red doesn't feel, not the red, the grid config, like the grid accents and the cost for us to do things. I'm not where I understand if the pavers are the move for ease of repair, that I can be totally sold on. I'm not sold on feeling a need to spend money to make the sidewalk look pretty, because the sidewalk doesn't make Moscow. And I feel like we already do a lot with our own character and with our other decorations and art installations, and I'm not feeling super drawn to it. I'm also really concerned about the market framework may eventually change someday. We may have a market that someday is so big that it takes 3 Amandas to run and it goes all the way from A Street. Yeah, Amanda says, give me 2 more now. From A Street all the way down to the highway. And I am concerned about us spending money to decorate and make something look pretty, highlighting what we use as our downtown right now as our downtown market footprint, because there may be a day where you're not having as many insurance companies and banks on the other side, and you may see more foot traffic generated between A and 3rd. So my 2 cents, downtown corridor design, if we decide to do something flashy on the sidewalk or whatever, I think it's really important that it's consistent for the entire corridor. I know part of that is driven by the Woonurf, and this may be an entire box of worms that I am about to unleash on everyone. I apologize to anyone who thought this was going to be a short meeting, because like this is so fun for me. Like this is like scratches my noodling itch. How much money does it add to the expense to do the Woonurf piece where it's bringing everything level? Because my newfound hesitation tonight, I love that the community is interested in it. I do think we're a really pedestrian oriented and alternate transportation driven community, and I hope to continue that. And I think the Woonurf would boost that. It's really hard for us to ever go back from doing a Woonurf if the community doesn't like it. I'm concerned about we just had our snow report. I'm concerned about our businesses in the Woonurf being salty about how the snow moves. I'm concerned about student drivers parking and even us thinking that where there's some barriers we can do. As we've talked more about it tonight, I'm actually feeling pretty concerned about the idea of bringing the Woonurf and bringing it flush. And so I'm looking to my council, because this is new, because, and if it saves us a significant amount of money to not have to do that stretch in that way, and we can meet improvements with curb improvements and other things and other pedestrian bubbles, I remember what they're called. I could be sold on scrapping the Woonurf, but I'm aware that the community is really excited about it, but I don't know that they've sat through 6 hours of presentations about it. Sorry, Maureen's got.
I just want to make one comment with respect to that, because to me, curbs are challenging. And so the issue is if you reduce curves or eliminate curves, then it makes it much easier for people who have walking issues. And so the idea of eliminate, I don't know how you exactly work it out. I totally believe that you guys can do it, that you can figure out how those cars are driving on top of our trees. But, you know, at the same time, I like the idea of not having a curb and just going straight up it and going straight on the sidewalk. That's from my perspective.
I think that the thing about the color too is not just the aesthetic, but it demarcates it as this is a different area and you better be paying attention if you're driving through it. And so, I know like that's been an issue that people have talked about it, but I don't think it's just an aesthetic thing. I think it's a way to demarcate the area.
And maybe Matt can provide some comment. I think the elevation of the street section, I mean, you do have a number of challenges that creates. You do have vehicle control, you have drainage control. And so you do have some challenges.
Trade-off, yeah.
You're probably not going to see a substantial cost difference. You're replacing all the surfacing.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, some of our intersections are already at grade. So then you're going to be pouring curb and gutter sections. You're going to be doing all the hardscape. The actual fill material to elevate the roadway is not going to be substantial. So from a cost perspective, I don't think the elevated street is going to save you $1 million. It may save you a couple $100,000 on the $8 million project.
That's helpful.
Because you're going to replace, ribbon curb with a curb and gutter section. You're just going to be elevating the roadway in some areas a few inches from where it currently sits. So it's probably not a huge cost. Now, it does create challenges. And, I've been one that's been concerned about drainage control and vehicle control. Because those are really the two things that this creates. And usually you have a row of bollards that replaces a curb, and that becomes your control. Now you can use trees where it makes sense, but you don't want them rolling up on a tree grade or into a landscape area. So more often than not, where you see those shared areas, you do see, bollards every 6 to 8 feet, and that becomes your vehicle barrier. And you can do that. We'll have to have a stock at the shop to replace because you're going to have a number of them damaged periodically.
I think that's what's bumming me out because I think I'm hopeful that if we can meet some of these really important ADA improvements and be really mindful with how we're designing our intersections and crosswalks, maybe, and we do lean into maybe some of the design stuff for making it colorful and make drivers pay more attention. I could be sold on it, but I'm more scared that we're going to find ourselves. You can't go back to putting in a curb or all that. Well, I say that like I know. I should be asking that. How easy if we woo nerf and we no more woo nerf? What does that look like?
Oh, no.
What's the control Z?
You don't even contemplate that. You don't even want to contemplate the cost of you reconstructing the entire project.
And that's what scares me. So, and again, I say again because they've heard me say it. I'm a really good worst case scenario thinker. That is like I'm really proud of it. I also made sure to put a note. Like I really appreciate the phasing ideas. I'm glad that the splash pad's there. I know there's a lot of tiny humans who are going to be really and dogs who will be very excited about it. And I was going to just make a plug to make sure that we went from being really excited about the stage conversation and where that could end up. I'm game for whatever activates and enhances the Friendship Square piece in particular, so long as my staff is happy, as long as the people who are actually moving the sandbags and stuff, like whatever makes sense for the events team, I can get on board with. And I'm feeling kind of spoiled because we don't, our conversation, I know you're going through this with Pullman, like it looks really different for us because we are really lucky just with it. We have a space that is easy for us to activate, people who know how to do it, and a community that shows up for us. And so for all that I'm suddenly going through my list of panicky things and thoughts, I am really grateful. I am really excited.
Just I think you got a lot of talking points there to work through and recycle back through the various folks, the working committee and everybody else.
Sir.
But by and large, I think the consensus is the direction is headed the right way with some tweaking around the edges.
Okay.
And we'll be all right with that.
Great.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have one last question. It'll be really short. Do you have other cities you could show us examples of?
So I had the great pleasure of visiting the great college town of Madison, Wisconsin last fall.
Oh,
They get some snow there, you might have
a
heard.
little bit. Yeah.
And they have a Woonerf on, I believe it's State Street, as it goes from the state capitol down to their student union building. So here I am walking down State Street in Madison, going to a football game and going, oh, well, this is what this looks like. So it's a good example of how that works. I believe it's been in place probably 15 years or so, if not longer.
How many people have been killed because of that? Because
Oh,
they parked their
wow.
car?
I didn't hear you. I'm
The
sorry.
answer is, the concern there is that people aren't going to know where to park the car and do that. Have they had a problem with that?
I can't speak to the experience. I was there on a busy home football weekend, and Lord knows there were people everywhere. Not all of them in a completely sober frame of mind, and it seemed to work okay, to my knowledge.
Thank you.
Okay. That takes us on to reports. Let's see, I started there last time. We'll start with you this time.
Good. Okay. I wrote down my things and then I covered them up. Historic Preservation Commission toured Reidenbaugh Hall up on campus. I was not able to join them because it was 20 feet away from where I work and work was busy. Nils did share with me today, though, that it was quite a nice tour. And it is a cool building. So Nils.
No, I said it is a cool
Yeah,
building.
okay.
Sorry.
Planning and zoning last week was canceled. I think it was due to a lack of a quorum. And I think agenda items too. I mean, it was not that they just willy-nilly cancel things. Highlight of probably the whole month of April for me, David Schott, you know what I'm going to say, Arbor Day on Friday. I think it was my first proclamation too. Too bad that you weren't there. It was really terrible because I had to do it and it was awesome. We had actually a pretty decent crowd, some of whom were 10 or 12 years old. The rest of them were little tiny people coming to hear story time, which was cool. But just a really neat, again, we planted 2 Persian ironwood trees on the north side of the library. Go look at them. They're a little dormant right now, but they are going to kick it in pretty soon and they're going to be beautiful. We had seedlings there, and I'm telling you, this is the weekend to go get your seedlings at Farmers Market, opening weekend, and seedlings, black cherry, big tooth maple, and incense cedar, my favorite of the group. So you really want to go, and I wouldn't be shy about, make sure you got the right spot for them, but take one of each. They're going to be awesome. What else? Oh, we had our t-shirts, and I'm pointing at Nick back in the corner. He was a working machine when we were planting trees on Friday. It was awesome. He did a good job. And then he went back and did dendrochronology at the university. So he's kind of awesome. We'll be at the farmers market this opening weekend, and then again on my kid's birthday. So all around, it was really fun. And we got t-shirts too. Some of the marketing pictures as we speak for trees, and we got great t-shirts that say it. So it was a good week to be part of the tree commission.
As opposed to all those other times where it's sad.
It's never sad.
Okay. Maureen.
Okay, so the farmers market starts, and so I'm on the farmers market commission. They've done a great job of getting an enormous number of vendors in there, and they kind of rotate them through. I just want to say, for someone who knew the farmers market years ago, walking in and being part of that commission, it is run so incredibly smoothly, and with real well thought out and professional approach to it. Okay, and then in terms of the SEC, they will be at the market on June 6th, and they will be distributing wildflower seeds for their pollinator approach to life. And also, some of U of I students, as well as Wazoo students, etymology students, all created and put forth a bee hotel workshop last weekend. I didn't attend it, but I think what a fun thing to have a bee hotel workshop. Weren't they building little boxes or something, David? I don't know exactly what they did, but it was pretty fun, I think. And just to kind of remind people, that the URA is going to do the Friday, the end of today, end of Friday this week is when the submissions will be in on the proposals for the 6th and Jackson property. And it is probably going to be a decision maker in terms of which of those proposals that we look at, we pick will be July 10th, the 20th. So, I mean, that's a lot of stuff coming up for both of those.
Big
So,
summer.
yeah.
That it?
That's what I'm going to say.
Sandra?
So my reports are odd this time around because most of my general council things were canceled, no PBAC. And Mr. Belknap, if you could remind me, do we have the Moscow volunteer graduation coming up for fire? Is it next Wednesday?
It's this Wednesday.
Wednesday.
So we've got graduation and life-saving awards. It's going to be at 6:30 p.m. Station 3.
Thank you. So coming up, excited to see that and then to report back on it. But a couple other things going on. I got to talk to one of the sororities about civic action and how to get involved, and that was really fun. Had some great questions and lots of interest for the students there. I enjoyed that a lot. On Earth Day, I got to take a group of folks, and I'm sorry Nick wasn't there. Nick would have had a good time at this too. But we had a Go Ducks and Go Vandals Earth Day event at McDonald's School, and we helped redo their beds, which was fun. I got to get really muddy and dirty and not get in trouble for it, so I like that a lot. And then Arlene didn't talk about it very much, but Ren Fair this weekend, it is the 50th anniversary. David's still here. We're pretty excited about that. We're still, people want to help on Friday morning, starting about 8 o'clock at East City Park. Could always use some help painting lines and helping set things up. So if you've got spare hour, 2 or 10, maybe venture on down East City Park. We'd love the help there. And then, of course, come down and enjoy Ren Fair. We have more booths and vendors this year. Last year was the first time really since COVID, and we were struggling a little bit, I think, to find folks, and people were nervous to come back. So we expect our 50th to be really exciting and big and fun. We have some new events coming on in the kid area too, so please come. And then the last plug I want to give is to remember your nonprofits this week. It is Idaho Gives, and we have a lot of great nonprofits out there, and some are big and some are little. All of them are scrapping for dollars, and so if you have a spare dime or dollar or $1 million, heck, that'd be awesome too. But we have a lot of nonprofits. You can just go to idahogives.org, type in the nonprofit you're looking for, or just check some others out. It's all over the state, but I'm partial to Moscow, so I'm putting a plug in for our Moscow nonprofits. And thanks for letting me go off on that a little bit.
Julia?
This past 2 weeks, I went to the downtown cleanup on Earth Day, which the city employees were out in force. Well as Mayor Becky. And so that was great. Our downtown is well cared for. And the thing that I picked up the most were cigarette butts. So stop it. And also Clearwater Economic Development Agency had its annual meeting this past week at the Clearwater River Casino, which does not really sound like work, but it was. And we got their annual report about the good work they do for economic development, and also heard a entertaining lecture about the workforce and demographics. It's great.
Haley?
A couple updates. I had Smart Transit board meeting 2 weeks ago, and your free local transportation is still doing great. I think today they're auctioning off a non-working bus that we're hoping someone can just come and wants. Yeah, it's fine. Public auction. It's kind of been fun to learn about that process, but it's. I'm hoping someone's like really excited about the idea of van life. But the good news is Andy was able to get enough supply of Narcan kits. And so all of the Smart Transit staff will be receiving training. There's from, I think, the department, the Panhandles chapter regional Department of Health and Welfare on how to use it. And so we'll always hope we never need to, but I'm really excited and proud that Andy's focused on that and the well-being of our community. Had the AIC spring meeting, and so learned, I'll let Art to speak to some of the finer, more fun things that we learned from them. We walked through what legislative action happened and what it means for us as people trying to
None
make
of it good, hard.
Yeah, the Cliff Notes is a couple more curveballs as we try to just do right by our citizens and some wrenches in the plans there.
Do you want to announce
You
your,
might
or you've been
announce your
Oh,
session.
yes. I am honored and excited to serve as our region 2 district representative for
Board member for the
board
AIC.
member for the
from
AIC
District
and the League of Idaho Cities. So what that means, it means more meetings and I love it. So, and then I had a quick Human Rights Commission meeting. One of the fall events we were trying to do in April, one of the events we had tried to do in April at the 1912 Center, which is what are human rights, a really cool foundational conversation. We're going to bump out a little further into potentially in the early fall. It was my month of arriving to everything like 5 minutes late because I got there as Kelly was loading up the donuts for downtown cleanup. She offered me a donut and I told her I didn't earn one, so I did not take one. But yeah, downtown was clean and sparkly. Got to see Arbor Day and Gina, I got to huck some dirt at the trees, which was great. But I came from Arbor Day because of the really cool University of Idaho Engineering Expo. That is just really so cool to see held in the arena with really cool projects that these students are doing. A lot of them civil engineering projects for small districts, bridges, road improvements and things like that. So it's cool to see these kids get exposed, these youths be exposed to cool projects and bettering their communities and communities they probably don't have exposure to. So all good things. Happy May. That's what I got.
Okay.
Happy May.
Yeah, so last 2 weeks went to the Parks and Rec. Great meeting. Nothing that needs to really be brought forth to council. Getting ready to open the pool. That's something to be excited about. So more good weather days ahead.
Do you have lifeguards? That was our issue last year. Do we have lifeguards this year?
They brought it up that I think they're still looking for lifeguards. I can't remember. I think always looking for lifeguards is always going to be a thing. But wasn't a topic of the conversation. And then lastly, volunteered at Family Promise. It's great. Great thing to do. They're doing great work in the community. And so I was happy to spend a night at the Methodist Church and have a good conversation with people that are getting back on their feet. So.
Let's see. For me, somewhat redundantly, the AIC meeting was held. A lot of discussion on what the legislature did or didn't during the last session. So it has an impact on the city. A lot of it is still up in the air, especially as regards the monies that are shared from the state coffers to the counties and the cities. And I don't think anybody really has a good handle on any of that yet because it's so convoluted. On happier notes, the airport terminal project is on schedule and moving forward. Have a look at the website, watch it going up. You can actually, even from the road now, see things sticking up out of the ground, which conceal the fact that most of what's gone on is below grade. We got another grant that will allow for enhancement of space, not having to knock out the west wall immediately. It's just gone already for administrative spaces and an extra gate. And we were also helped by a $500,000 grant from the Idaho Department of Aeronautics, which helps with the local match substantially. I spoke at the Board of Realtors meeting recently, sort of a rehash of the State of the City address. Downtown cleanup went on. Turns out that wet leaves up against curbs where the sweepers can't get to them weigh a bloody ton. They are so heavy. Met with the Graduates and Professional Students Association officers and had a good discussion there. And on the city side, budget work continues. The budget's getting tuned in. It's looking pretty good for balancing. I wish there was more there to balance with, but it is progressing. So we're getting there, City Council. I know you're awash in anticipation of pages and pages of numbers. Yes. So
I just want to say that we all here in this district appreciate Art. He stepped down now from the position of the board of the AIC, and he served as the president. Didn't you serve as president for a while? Okay, you were on
No,
it
I
for
didn't,
like,
but I was on it for 4 years.
Yeah.
So anyway, a while.
so thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank
So-
you for,
And now you are doomed from January
Gina and
until
I, we're
March,
ready.
every Friday morning. Boom.
love it.
Yes, Gina's the other District 2 board
Just the
member.
other one.
So with that, got anything, Bill?
Just a reminder, this week we have the monthly breakfast meeting on Wednesday morning, 7 a.m. at the Wallace Complex. Seems like we just had that.
I thought they were canceling most of those.
Yeah,
Did they cancel it?
Canceling them.
I thought it was every other month.
I got a
No.
bunch of cancellations and I can't remember what months or what ones, so I'll have to check.
Mine's still on the calendar, so perhaps we should check with January.
Yeah, we could verify. It's monthly, just they had a number that they canceled and it got out of the city. Yeah, so we'll verify, let the council know.
Yep.
I'll-
Otherwise, Wednesday at 7 a.m.
Love it.
Inspirational time of the day. Okay, so that's it. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? I thought I heard one. We're adjourned.